Welcome everybody to the latest edition of the Inside Track. I'm really happy today because we've got a fabulous guest on, Lisa Kuecker. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we met down in London a few months ago, and I've been following your stuff for a long while now. You're the owner of Studio Grow, amongst other things. Now, I know you're extremely well known in the US with all your projects, and we'll come on to those. But just for our listeners in the UK, do you want to give us a run through who Lisa is, what your sort of background is, and where you're at now?
Yeah. And I'm excited. I love the UK because I went to school there. I went to King's College in London. One of those pivotal experiences that shapes everyone. I fell into fitness. I started in this industry, like a lot of us, as a trainer and an instructor. My original company, my first company straight out of college, was in the tech space. And when I had an opportunity, I know, kind of a strange thing, when I had an opportunity to make the leap, it was actually building studios inside of tech companies. And so in the mid-aughts, I was starting to build studios inside of Intel Corporation, yoga, Pilates, because that's like, the trio that everyone expects. And in 2008, I had an opportunity to open our first brick and mortar, like traditional studio group. And, we were really unique. We had inside of them, we had spaces that would have been open gyms. We had group training. We had small group training, athletic training. We had one-on-one private training. We had focuses in some of our studios in yoga. We had physical therapies in half of our location. We had cardiac rehab in one of our locations, and we're expanding that. We bought land and built out a full-scale space for outdoor training. And so, this was one of those things that I was the traditional, I suppose, independent studio owner that was just like, hey, I'm doing something different. I was kind of fulfilling this passion.
Let's try it, let's do it, and let's see what happens, sort of thing.
Totally. I mean, and it was unbelievably successful. In 2016, I had none of my businesses on the market, and all of a sudden I got offers on all of my locations in a 4-month period. We sold them the mid 7 figures, which was amazing because we didn't really have debt. We didn't have partners. This was just been a bootstrapped operation. And in the meantime, we had been showing people for years. We'd let people in, over 250 owners, into our locations to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Because we were doing things really differently than most people in the industry. And the next thing you know, in 2015, just before we started selling these businesses, I finally said, maybe there's a little something here. I actually had a really pushy guy who was like, I need to work with you. And I'm like, we're not doing this anymore. We're just going to run our studios. And he's like, this is a business unto itself. And I was like, maybe this is a business unto itself. I can remember standing in my yard and thinking, this is something we should do. And lo and behold, Studio Grow has grown. We're the largest boutique fitness consultancy in the world. We have a staff of 47. We work in 42 countries. Wow. We are, we're really getting to do some groundbreaking things, and it's led to some other incredible projects. I'm really excited. I've partnered with Deborah Strogo, who is the founder of Row House, Mo Iqbal, who's the founder of Sweatworks. We were able to beta test fitness weeks, the idea of restaurant weeks, but fitness week style. Okay. In New York last year. We had just under 700 studios, tens of thousands of people came through. And so in 2024, we roll that out in 6 cities, 5 in the US and Dubai. And we're certainly hoping in 2025, we're coming to London.
And what is that, Lisa? Give us a rundown of what?
Literally, in the US, it's a very common concept that we'll have restaurant weeks. It became a way for restaurants to fill down weeks of the year. And restaurants would make a prefix menu. So they would say, hey, you're going to get 3 courses. It might normally cost you $50, but this week it's going to cost you $35. We're going to serve, kind of the same thing across everyone. You're going to see the menu in advance. You know what you're signing up for. And it became an enormous marketing way for restaurants. Deborah actually invented, I worked on restaurant weeks throughout the Southeast. I had a software company that helped support them. Deborah invented Broadway weeks with the New York Department of Tourism, which was the same thing with Broadway shows, getting them filled up for 1 week. And so this became this beautiful idea of how do we take the idea of this for fitness studios? We know marketing is a major issue. We know that we've all had a rough couple of years coming out of this. And one of the things that we know that we can do, because we spend an enormous amount of money testing marketing, really seeing what's working as the world, is we knew we could drive a huge number of people into studios in a short period of time. And that was proven in New York. I mean, it was really unbelievable to see this. So we see this as a way to really uplift the industry, take some weeks that might be a little quieter than normal, and get people to start to experience new studios. And really, hopefully not just studios, but moving into the health club space as well. So across the fitness industry. So that is our newest launching in 2024. Our first week will take place in the spring of 2024. And
it's almost like taking fitness, because we have National Fitness Week, which is, well,
Totally.
National Fitness Day we have here.
Totally. Yeah.
Some have spread it over a week, but it's almost taking that, but actually going, instead of handing out loads of free passes, we're going to monetize this and make it a way of bringing additional revenue to these clubs.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things that we recognized early on is that free is lovely, but the ability to turn people from visitors into members is far more important. And so, you know,
it's also hard once you start giving stuff away free.
devalue
It's a
it.
different mindset, isn't it? Someone turns up for free. They don't turn up to join. And so when you're trying to do a campaign like you guys are doing and you do it for free, people are turning up for that. They're turning up as an experience. It's great. But there's no intention to join. When someone pays, even if it's a 5 or a 10 or 15, whatever it is, small amount, the mindset's different when that person turns up.
Exactly right. And so that's why, you know, we did it in New York as a paid offer. You know, it's not a high cost offer. It's a paid offer. But one of the things that we recognized, it's one of the things we're actually, you know, testing right now behind the scenes, is we're building out the entire playbook of how do you take a person from this one offer, you know, and how do you turn them into a member? We're seeing really great success. You know, we're averaging about 53% conversion rate from that offer. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is, with every studio that's taking part, every health club that's taking part, is really saying, this is the playbook. Like, this is every automation you're going to send. This is how your scripts are going to be. These are the conversations you're going to have, because, you know, this can't just be about driving people in the door. It's about keeping them there. And I think that's so oftentimes, you know, we talk to people and they're like, I need marketing. And we get it. I love marketing. We test about half a $500,000 a year is our test spend right now for building things out and doing this. Trust me, my husband's horrified. Every time he looks, can be a little smaller, just a little bit. But what it has given us is like, okay, great. We know we can get people in your door. But if that's all we do, we haven't done our job. This is about the sales process.
If it doesn't convert, then it's almost pointless doing, isn't it? It's
to be honest with you, there are an awful lot of studios and health clubs that are wasting so much money. And it's because they've got the front end marketing, but they don't have a client journey that actually turns them into a long-term evangelist, a long-term member.
Yeah, absolutely. And just out of interest, with those, obviously you've done the trial in New York this time around. Did you see any variance in the type of clubs that you were working with? So the boutique ones did better than that style, or was it pretty much all of them seemed to do really well? And
you know, so we focused on studios when Deborah really led that, and when it was going on, it was a focus on studios. And one thing that I think was really important was bringing together very specific large scale brands, the Berries of the world and things like that, with mom and pop shops. You know, I'm really excited because in this case, you know, we're going to be building out some pretty amazing technology that goes around this. So an incredible app that when you register, you know, you're going to be able to geo-fence and say, hey, these are all the studios that are around me right now. You're going to have some beautiful ways to really see and dive in. And our goal is to get people, again, to step outside of their comfort zone. So oftentimes we feel like there's a very large hurdle in trying something new inside of
Yeah.
fitness. And I say that even as someone who loves fitness, it's uncomfortable and a little bit intimidating to walk into a place that's new, even if this is like what you love and what you do. So I can only imagine if I'm just, Susie Q and I'm sitting there on the side and I haven't worked out a lot. I'm going to have even more intimidation. And that
Yeah,
factor is going to be
exactly.
magnified on there. And so our goal is, how do we reduce that as much as possible? And again, I think this is the key thing. Everything we've done, or everything I've done in our companies, has been, how do we serve the sustainable growth of this industry so that we can impact the world? And this is
I
just
think that's really interesting. I think we'll come on to that, Lisa, because you've done a lot of work, and remind me if we don't, because you guys have done a lot of work with going to Washington and doing all that stuff, and I think it's important people understand. In actual fact, let's do that now, because I think you guys, I can't remember the name of the policy that you guys have backed up.
yeah.
FIT, isn't it? PHIT. That's it.
Yeah.
But do you want to explain what that is? Because I think in the UK, we need to follow. We don't always like following what the Americans do and being Brits, but I think it's we don't always. Sometimes we do, but I think what you guys are doing over there and really pushing this onto the sort of healthcare sector and sort of going, well, okay, we need to be part of that, is something we need to get behind in the UK as well. I know we talked about this in London, but do you want to give us an idea of what you guys are doing as a boutique sector to bring fitness to the nation and make it a lot more prominent?
Yeah, and I could talk about, even because I was at Parliament when I went to Parliament while I was in London on the trip that I saw you on. So, I mean, I have some very strong thoughts on the UK as well. That's kind of our next big market to organize advocacy in.
Yeah.
Partly selfishly, because I really like coming. But we're going to go with that. But in reality, I'll tell you the two big problems that we saw, and COVID amplified this. The first is that, and we see this in every market, there is a divide in our industry. We have health clubs in the UK. You're going to have public and independent, private, what have you not within this, and then you have boutique fitness. And somehow we've gotten the idea that these are all very different industries.
Yeah.
When in reality, we serve the same consumer. We serve the same long-term purpose. And so the first thing we recognized is, oh my gosh, we're really struggling and fighting through this idea that we're all very different industries. The second is that I genuinely believe that we sit on the forefront of preventative medicine. This is not a question mark. We are living in one of the sickest ages the world has ever seen, in spite of having better healthcare, more food, better resources than we have ever had. I mean, the statistics on worldwide poverty are remarkable. So why are we seeing lifespans diminish? And it is so often down to what people are eating and how they're moving. And that's what we do. That is our business. And so at the very forefront of what preventative health is this idea of what can we do? So in the US, that has ramped up, and IHRSA, the International Health Racquet and Sports Club Association, which is a worldwide body, has really had this mass shift. They've always been a great advocate, but that is really where they're leading. And the FIT Act, PHIT, as you said, which is coming down to the personal health spending, essentially, is really a way of how do we go on ahead and allocate pre-tax dollars through. In the US, we have something called HSAs, health savings account, and FSAs, which is where you can put money in pre-tax. You don't have to pay taxes on it, and you can utilize it for very specific things. Historically, that's been medical bills, and we're making a push to expand that to fitness services, fitness equipment, and youth sports, all of which I think serves some really important things in the overall long-term health of where people are at. And, I can go beyond that. We're doing work right now with the Department of Defense, really pushing and working with the Congress and the government here in the US to assist with military readiness programs.
And I think that, I mean, for you guys, that's massive. I mean, your military is such a huge part of society, as well as obviously what the work they do around the world. But I think to get involved in that, the amount, even if you took out the fact it's the military, the volume of people you can impact on a program like that is incredible.
It's massive. And I think, this is the key thing. We're seeing the fact that, one, We know we've got to struggle right now in society with our overall health and with preventable disease specifically. Okay. That's where we're looking to say, how can we transform the statistics around preventable?
Well, I think here's a stat for you. Obviously our medical system is completely different to yours,
Oh,
but in the
let's
UK alone, but
yeah.
the thing is, the policies and the theory behind it still works. But
Yeah.
in the UK, 1/5 of the NHS budget, which I couldn't tell you how many billions, if not trillions, that is down to diabetes. It's spent on diabetes and the obviously the other issues that come along with diabetes. 1/5. It's absolutely bonkers.
And that's a similar statistic in most developed countries right now. I mean,
And that's all, and that's a lifestyle disease.
that is
Only 15% of people are type 1.
I mean, this is something I still remember one of my best friends in 6th grade getting diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and looking at this. And I mean, in his mind at that point, Steve thought this was like a death sentence. I mean, it was to a 6th grader, it's this terrifying thing. So to realize that we're choosing and we're taking actions that are leading us down a path of placing us in that same thing that terrified this best friend of mine in 6th grade, it's one where when we start to think about it, we go, oh my God, we're spending so much money. And this is universal. Again, it's the US, it's the UK, but I guarantee you walk into Canada, you walk into Australia, because we're seeing these types of numbers all over the world. And we have an opportunity to probably spend a whole lot less money and have people be a whole lot happier, a whole lot healthier, and live lives that are just generally whole lives. If we do something different and we start viewing the fact that, exercise is medicine, what you eat does matter, and that, we've got an amazing private resource that if we could just amplify their voice and go.
Do you think, though, the challenge is because what we keep focused on in the UK, and you'll find this when you come over, is a lot of the focus tends to be on what the government can do for us to make those changes, rather than what we need to do to change the mindset of the people, the population. So we're almost going, we want your help as government. You need to give us something to make us, and then I almost think, I know you guys are working through Parliament or through your government to help this, but I think sometimes we need to get the population's mindset changed for us then to get momentum, because I don't think government's gonna drive it down.
It's interesting. So when I was at Parliament, I went up and just listened. There were some hearings going on some NHS budgetary items that I was very curious to look at. And one thing that it's clear is I think the initial partnership in many ways needs to be between the medical community and the fitness industry. This is something that what your doctor tells you, there's a reason we fill prescriptions. People tend to listen to what their doctor says. So while I look at the government as being a piece of this in the sense that they employ a large number of medical practitioners across the UK, including quite a few of my clients in the UK are medical practitioners. They happen to own studios as well. So it's that joint piece of this. I think you realize that that's going to be our first group. In medical school, they're taught an awful lot about how to prescribe drugs, not how to prescribe preventative wellness care. And that's where we can come in and help ensure that we've got a well-educated medical population. The second piece of this is that, no doubt we are confronted with more and more activities that are the norm that lead to a sedentary lifestyle. I mean, when I was a kid, it was video games were the scariest thing. Now, quite frankly, this scares me more than just about anything else that I can see, because it's something that does such a good job of keeping us still. It's so easy to do that instead of going for a walk or running around outside or playing a sport or doing any of those things. So I think beyond this, it's going to be a question of how do we encourage movement in general? I would love to see people inside of studios. I'd love to see people inside of gyms. I mean, we've got such great resources there. We know that people will get better results. We know they'll get better workouts, but this can be as simple as starting with a reminder that you just got to get out of your house and walk. It doesn't matter if it's raining. It doesn't matter if it's doing anything else. Track what you're doing when you're walking and go. You know,
we were speaking to Richard Sinnott and Bobby Verdun and they, a few months back, and they were talking about the theory of gyms without walls. So although you've got your business, we're also got the memberships that are outside. So it's not necessarily you going for a walk and not being part, but it's having that community that you're almost tracking what your clients are doing outside of the facilities as well as in it. And you create this community. And then we're sort of going, well, why does a gym studio have to have the walls as such? Yes, that's where we train, but we should be engaging with all those that do this stuff outside of that four walls as well. And I thought, what a great way to say it.
It's a brilliant, you know, it's funny. I posted this on LinkedIn not long ago. We're working with a couple of clients, and, you know, I always say I've had to move a lot. My husband was in the military, so we've moved like 9 times over our marriage. And, you know, there's like 3 things you struggle to find, like a hairdresser. You know, if you go to church, where do you go to church? And where do you actually go walk? Like, what do you do outdoors? And, you know, one of the things that I reached out and I said, hey, I want you to build, like, you know, I was like, Nature Fit, come up with something like that. We're like, this is where you're going to come inside the studio, but these are the places where you go. This is my favorite walk. It doesn't have to be a trail. For me, it's walking onto campus. You know, I make that walk 3 or 4 times a week. Maybe it's my favorite trails. In addition to that, maybe it's like, this is where you can take your kids on a Saturday morning. That's beautiful. Don't forget to share those things as well. And so it's funny, these people my 2 clients have now built this. And when they're joining and when they're going around town, they're sharing this all over town. And it's just a simple map that is like, and yes, their studio is on the map. Y'all make sure your studio is on it if you do this and steal this idea, because it's a good one. And they have a great QR code that's like, hey, want to pop into our studio after you've done some of these things? Scan this code and join us on an introductory. It's one of those that becomes something universal that can be shared. By the way, we put it as like a simple PDF on their website and pixel that for Google and Facebook. So then we can then drive people through Google searches of what do I do in my area. We're driving people to consistently come in. And I think this is the kind of like symbiotic circle of life that we get to build, that it isn't just going to be what happens in our gym. It isn't just going to be what happens in a studio. This isn't going to be about getting someone to move. That's it. That's it. And that gets me excited. I grew up in New Orleans, and that may not mean a lot if you're sitting in the UK right now, but New Orleans is like the capital of great food in the United States. Like Emeril Lagasse, you want to see like things that are astounding. They all start in New Orleans, and I'm biased. I'm from there. I mean, you know, it is what it is, but literally, I mean, it's the restaurant capital of the US.
Music and partying is how I see New Orleans.
Yeah, we have that
jazz.
Yeah, we're a pretty fabulous place to visit. Let me be clear. But, you know, for those of us that grow up there, it all starts with the food. But we're also the most obese, or one of the most obese spots in the US. And so for me, I grew up with this heightened awareness of, hey, I have an amazing culture. And unfortunately, if it's taken to an extreme, it's leading to some pretty horrific outcomes for people. And this is an opportunity of saying, how do we change that? And again, not everyone's going to be able to walk into your studio. You know, there are going to be people who have the wrong schedules, the wrong budgets, the wrong just even locations to walk in. But we can all do our part in helping just the message. And I think this is, you know, what you're speaking of earlier, the message or idea that movement matters. Okay. And that it's joyful, that it's pleasurable, because we've somehow written this idea that taking a walk is horrible, that going to the gym is the worst thing that you could ever imagine. I got to tell you, it can be fabulous. It can be fun. It's up to us. And that's another narrative in the story as we start to tell, you know, you asked earlier, does the government need to tell the story? I don't think we trust governments very much. I mean, in general, and I think that's relatively universal. So I think the story needs to be that our public relations campaign needs to be that it's fun. Yeah. It's fun to go do these things. And you can make it fun. You don't have to kill yourself in the process. You shouldn't be going to the gym the very first time and working out so hard that you can't walk for 3 days, because then you will think it's awful.
I think the key is as well, obviously, like you say, if because obesity and things like that have got so big at the minute, excuse the pun, but it's got such a problem. that it's actually preventing people to make that choice to go and it's almost like it's a cycle, isn't it? You get to a certain position, then it goes, it's too difficult to then go, and then it just spirals. And it's trying to find a way that makes that easier for people to be able to do, where they don't feel as self-conscious, that they don't feel, because it's like someone who's severely overweight isn't going to go jump into a high octane HIIT program. It's just not going to happen. So it's trying to,
and maybe even dangerous. Just being real.
Absolutely. And I think that's where we just need to find that way that encourages it, because that's a huge population, and whether in the Western world it's such a big problem that it's almost like going. I remember 10 years ago, might be 20 years ago, that the grey market, we used to call it, the over 60s, that was, they've got the money, that's where we need to go after. And you're sort of going, actually, the bigger market potentially is this overweight, clinically problematic population, but it's how we get them and encourage them, then it's the right thing to do. Not just based on you need to lose the weight so you don't die. It's almost sort of going, well, it can be fun, but if we push them into CrossFit and these high, the real get your heart rate up, the real serious HIIT training, they just won't turn up, and that's half the battle, isn't it?
I mean, one of my favorite things to come out of the last few years, and I'm a little biased because to me this didn't come out of the last few years, is pickleball. When I was a kid, our family friend was on Bainbridge Island. He had the third pickleball court in the world, because that's where it kind of grew out of, on Bainbridge Island in Washington State. And whether it's pickleball or padel or any of these ideas of sports that we can do, there are so many ways that we can make it a delight. And we could make it something where it's communal, it's fun. I mean, I'm a tennis player. I'm not going to lie. I love tennis because I get to play. I think we were born to play. There's a reason we do it as children. It's something I hope you never grow out of on where this is. And so there's so many other opportunities. And some of our best introductory packages, some of our best programs that we've developed in the last few years, testing, and specifically in the last 2 years, have been around pickleball and padel. It's amazing because, they've swept the world. So
paddle, obviously we don't really have pickleball over here. I think it's the same thing, isn't it? That paddle.
Really,
but paddle is the fastest growing sport in the UK at the moment. It's absolutely bonkers.
It's phenomenal. And so why not take advantage? Like, we saw this and I said, let's piggyback off of this. So we started, the first test we ever run was Pilates for pickleball. We've now run it for padel, for pickleball, you name it. I mean, it is something that is just killing it. And people are coming in and they're coming in excited. So, I think the more we see surges of this, where we've made sports as well that are attainable, and we look at, say, how do we fit into this narrative? How do we fit into this journey? We've got to make sure that we're tying this up in a bow, and we're hopefully drawing our industry in, because to me, those are easy ways in. There's a couple of key points in a person's life. First of all, we know there's this mass drop-off point as people are leaving school. We know that that's just a huge thing where physical fitness just plummets. And so I think that that's the first point where I say, hey, there are some great things that we've been able to capture people, whether it's through sports, whether it's through fitness. How do we make sure that we're capturing that crew, and we're making sure that dive in movement is not happening? But the secondary piece of that is going to be, when do we hit these things? And for women, it's oftentimes around the time that their first child. We know there are some seasons in just both men and women's lives where we tend to see spikes in this. Some is situational, some is, very specific, age specific. And so how do we go on ahead and target those? There's a great market for the gray market. There's a huge market, though, that's out there for 18 to 25-year-olds to get them to continue moving.
I'll tell you what's interesting. I don't know whether you guys have seen it in the States. I think this younger age group, so my son's age group, we were talking earlier, my son's age group, that's sort of 18 to 22, 25, their understanding of fitness and their desire to want to train and be active seems to have flipped. We seem to have gone sort of my age group, which is okay, a bit older than you, but recently there seems to be an upsurge in kids wanting to be active, and that's a real positive. And I don't know whether it's necessarily something we've done, or it's this TikTok, Instagram, and everyone wants to look good, feel great. So that because it's such a more of a visual thing, it's encouraging more kids to exercise and stay in sport and whatever. But most of my son's mates, and maybe just around here, but I don't know, I seem to see a lot more active kids, especially in the gym that I go to. There's a lot more teenagers there than there ever has been in the past.
Yeah, it's funny. So we see that in our home. I'm a member of a sports club, so it's a mix. We've got tennis, pickleball, padel, squash, and then a health club, studios, the whole thing. So it's kind of a aquatics. It's kind of
an athletics club.
Yeah, it's a true athletic and sports club, and it's an interesting conversation because the head of that has been a longtime friend of ours. Our sons grew up together, and they're seeing the same thing. The numbers of teenagers that are walking through their doors, and not just walking through their doors, but truly utilizing their facilities, has gone through the roof. And so, everyone always is like, what markets do I target? Where do we go? And don't get me wrong. I mean, I've got some markets that I'm like, I have a sweet spot for the gray market. I think they get left out of boutique fitness an awful lot. And to me, they're just a phenomenal market because, hey, there's going to be more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 18 by 2020.
Not just that, they have the disposable income to be perfect for a boutique market.
It's a massive amount of people. But we got to serve them. I mean, I'm looking at my parents are in their 70s, their early 70s. I mean, they are wildly active, both of them. And because of that, like my father's smoking me on Black Diamond ski runs. And I'm like, that's what, trust me, it's mortifying, but also like a daughter.
I haven't got the balls for a black run. Red I can get to, black was always a little bit extreme for me.
Trust me, I no longer go on them. And then my father takes my poor 15-year-old comes off and he's like, Grandpa is hardcore. And I'm like, great. That's awesome. So, it's wonderful. But those are the things that I want to make sure. I watched my grandmother ride a bike till she was 90.
But isn't it interesting? So someone I can't remember who we were talking to the other day, and they were very much around not living longer, but being active for longer life. So not everybody wants to live to 100. To be fair, if I live to 100, I'm still active, brilliant. But if I live to 80 and then was not going to be active after that, I'd rather live to just 80 so I can enjoy life. I don't want to be sat in a chair watching telly for 20 years. And so they were saying that's where we need to work on. We need to work on keeping more people active for longer before they get to that stage where they're sat and they can't really do anything. And I think that's what people are seeking, aren't they? So like your dad, if he's still on black runs at 70, absolutely amazing. But we want to keep him there in his 80s if we can, into his mid 80s, 90s. And that's where he wants to be. He doesn't want to be sat on a sofa not being able to do anything. And I think that's where we need to focus if we're going to go into that market.
We have opportunities across the board, and this is I think we're sitting at one of the most exciting times in the fitness industry. I was looking and I was journaling the other day and just jotting down. I was reading something and looking at like what are the revolutions that we've seen. Whether it was the revolution, of just the rise of gyms and the rise of aerobic exercise, the rise of boutique fitness, the rise of low cost fitness, the rise of how AI is going to impact all of these things. We're seeing these revolutions that consistently take place inside of our industry. And we're at a spot where they're coming faster and faster and faster, and the opportunities are bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'd argue the stakes are higher because of looking at the populations around us that, we have remarkable opportunities to truly transform the world around us. Not many people get to say that. Not many people get to go to work and say that this is a piece of what they do. And in that, I think purpose is going to be driving us these next few years. And that leads us to, this is an interesting, I'm curious your thoughts on this, but I grew up in a restaurant family, which is very much the hospitality industry. And, one of my big conversations that I've been having these last few few months is, at least inside of boutique fitness, but I would argue inside of the entire fitness industry, we're really where service and hospitality meet. We're the service industry of, hey, we are generally people as a service, and hospitality where we are providing an extraordinary experience. We're sitting right in the crossroads of that. And if we do that well, more things can change for everyone. Whether it's, hey, I can charge something different. I can offer someone a chance to enjoy this more. People are going to see better results. Your teams are going to see, I think, in many ways.
That's why I struggle with budget, and not because budget clubs are inherently wrong. I don't. They have their marketplace and everything else. I just struggle because I come from a hospitality. So I did Marriott hotels for 11 years.
Okay.
Homes Place, which were very much service-driven businesses. So when I see them and I sort of go, well, they're almost just rent a facility, rent a treadmill. That's what they are. You go in, you do your own thing, you leave. The service isn't there. And I sort of go, but we're in a service industry. We change lives because we engage with people. We build communities. We encourage people to do things a certain way that they get, and they don't. And that's probably doing them a disservice in a certain way. But we are exactly what you're saying. We are a hospitality industry, and we need to create the fun. We need to create the drive. We need to make people have a journey and make it fun. And I just think that's where boutique and health clubs and that side of it potentially have a real opportunity to deliver. With the other side, I'm not the massive fan, but
it's interesting if you think about like the industrialized sector. It's really what business emerged from the 19th century when we got into manufacturing, and Henry Ford's assembly line, and the idea that people take on a machine-like quality. Okay, right? That's so oftentimes of what much of business has been about. And I would argue that the low-cost clubs, which tend to be much less about people and not, they're in many ways, they're the most industrialized of any fitness businesses. But I think they serve an enormous purpose in bringing on board the people who are, the brand new. They're brand new, they're scared, they're wondering, they're an easy way in. We talk about that low barrier to entry, and I think that they serve an important place. And if used correctly in our industry, for those who are not low cost, they can be enormous leaping off points to really draw people in. But for the rest of us, I think, so for so long, we've thought about this as, we haven't thought about it with the customer first in the mindset. I'm a little bit obsessed with the client journey and the member journey that we're going to take people on. That's something that it dramatically reduces your cost per lead because of referrals. It dramatically increases your conversion rate, and thus your cost per acquisition will go downward on where this is because your sales process improves. Your retention rate will skyrocket, which means your lifetime value is going to change. Getting this right. And places like Third Space, they've done a great job in the UK market of really doing things correctly and saying, how do I do this? 10 Pilates. There are people who are really saying, like, what does that journey need to look like? And I think that's something that's only just going to spread. Does it take work? Yeah, it does take work. I'm not going to lie, but it's purposeful work. It's the kind of work that I think makes people feel good. And is it as hard as we sometimes put this level on? No.
Not with the, I think the other thing as well is not with the tools we've got available to us.
Exactly right.
When you were talking about technology earlier and AI and everything else, and pardon me, the ability to allow that to help with your client journey. Now, what we don't want to do is take away all the human touches, but you've got those technologies to allow you to build that journey and amplify what you're already doing on the ground. And once it's built, it's actually a fairly easy process. But like you say, it doesn't just happen. You have to put the thought into it. You have to devise it. If you try and run with it and just make it up as you go, it'll feel that way and it won't come across as you want it. But I do that with all my clubs. It's one of the first things we do is like, what are your client journeys? Right. let's one from the sales journey, because a lot of them don't have it, all the way through to, because if you're a massive advocate of this, but your client journey or your member retention starts at the moment that person inquires. It doesn't start the moment they sign the paperwork to join the club. It's literally from the outset, and people need to understand that. But it needs to be a consciously thought out process. Why are we doing this? Why we've got a touch point there? Why do we do that? Why do we do? And if you've done all that, it just works. And just make sure you train your staff. It's
remarkable. It's one of these things. We're running real businesses here. Oftentimes I meet people who start in fitness just like I did. They start because they fell in love with it. It's a passion. And they want to just share where this is. But when you start to recognize that you get to run a business that has impact, that gets to serve, that's how I think you start to change and add these things. And, I think every lead matters. And that means that making sure that even the leads that are, I would call very soft leads, they're the person who's liking your Instagram post. They're the person who's peeking at your website. They haven't even made the inquiry yet, but we want to make sure that even for them, they're starting to see the story of who you are and the story of, more importantly, who your clients are and how they fit in that story. There's so many opportunities we have now to really tell this story well. And, the UK market is such a unique market. It's a market that I think probably has, and it's funny, I can say this because I was literally just talking with a group and they said, where would you invest these days? And I said, I'd invest in the UK, would be one of my top markets because it has such potential. There's some early stage opportunities at so many different areas of fitness. And there's some opportunity to just be maximized across fitness, in general, that, when we start to recognize that this is a market that quite frankly has explosive growth ahead of it if people take hold of it. And that's going to be the question of, if they take hold and where do they go? In the boutique sector, we see a lot of businesses that I would say are bridging that gap between hobby and business. It's almost like you're doing a dance between where these are. And it's amazing how every time I watch someone tip over, the next thing I know, they've got 5 studios and, they're a multi-million-pound operation.
Do you think the growth is going to come from these smaller operations, these boutiques that you tend to work a lot with, or do you think it's going to be the big groups that are just going to come? Because it's an interesting place because the boutiques have grown substantially, and it's sort of go, well, do they continue to expand like that, and the small independents and the ones with 2, 3, 5 clubs grow, or is someone going to come in with the big money and make an impact that way?
Well, if we assume that history repeats itself, and I tend to think that history does, there's a few things that I think we can know from this. First of all, I think that boutique fitness and any other part of fitness can easily see a bubble. And I think there are going to be certain modalities and sectors that probably are in the midst of that bubble right now, even in the UK, which means that bubble is going to burst at some point, and it probably won't be very pretty on there. I think boutique fitness has an enormous amount of opportunity left in the UK, largely because it is small footprints, and that's the easiest to find. I mean, I'm looking right now for a large scale space in a major market in the UK, and my ability to find that space is almost impossible. I mean, we've been looking at this for a year and a half. Whereas if I was putting in, a much smaller footprint, a footprint for a standard Pilates studio or a standard cycling studio, I could have had that 10 times over at this point. So I think that we talked about the barrier to entry for a client. There's also the barrier to entry for a studio group. So the first thing is do I think that there's going to continue to be opportunities? Yes, this is something where you can get in at a much lower investment because you don't have the space. Your expenses are going to be lower, so your profit margins can be much higher on where this goes. And you can have the team that reflects that. That is working extremely well around the world. That said, to answer, are we going to get big money coming through? Private equity is moving in across the entire industry. I was just talking with a franchise, and actually I was looking at statistics after I talked to this franchise, and 50% of Planet Fitness, with low cost operation, but 50% of Planet Fitness franchises are private equity backed at this point.
Are they?
Okay? Yeah. I mean, so you look at that and say, okay, and we're starting to see similar numbers across so many of the large franchise groups and just brands. I don't know if there's any major brands, whether I'm looking at the Soul Cycles of the world and things like that, that are not backed by some equity or have not been part of a merger and acquisition that have paired them with a high equity partner. So are we going to see that? Yeah, I think there's no doubt.
But that's positive, because if those guys are coming in, they're not always wanted. But if those guys are coming in, they clearly see profit in these, because they don't invest in low profit businesses. So
there's no doubt. I mean, look, an average studio that works with us is running somewhere between a 29 and 35% net profit margin. That's what they're walking away with their dividends with, and I would say that there are not. While that I think should be a real standard in business that you're hunting for, there are not many businesses that really can allow for that, where the model is correct for that. We have a unique place. So do I think we're going to see that? Yes. In the UK in particular, there's a few hurdles that they're going to have to leap over. We're so used to having some type of central space in communities. Our community center, if you will, where people could, host classes. And so, we've had a little bit of a devaluing, because if you're a yoga instructor and you decide you want to host a free class on Thursday afternoons for your friends, all of a sudden people in your community might go, yoga is worth exactly nothing, because that's what they're used to on this. So when a studio comes in and says, actually, yoga's worth, £15 for a session. Actually, I want to be able to pay my team, a beyond living wage. I want to pay them for their experience. Those are things that do shift and change that I think the UK is going to have to make a leap over, because we have had a bit of a devaluation in the market, especially on the boutique fitness side, just with the accessibility of low cost community spaces. That, by the way, those low cost community spaces, you could build into great studio opportunities. I work with a franchise. They have about 50 locations in the UK. One of those locations is a brick and mortar location. The rest are very much community centered. Some of them are running 35 classes a week out of their local community center.
Wow.
They're netting over £100,000 a year as their net. And so when I look at this, I don't want to write that off and suggest that is like, demonized in some way, shape, or form as a model or type. If you work it to your advantage and you treat it as a model, it can be an unbelievable way to, again, go into communities that you wouldn't expect. This is something we're actually doing, going towards the southwest portion of the UK right now, where we're really, bridging out. And before we're putting brick and mortar facilities, we're going into community centers, we're building out the model there and doing it with a relatively low risk. It's giving us the time to build the client base, the marketing, the brand awareness, to test the market and ensure we're in a really good place. And then it also gives us the space to find that ideal location. So, we've got some real opportunities across the UK to do things differently.
Yeah.
But I think if history is going to repeat itself, there's some mass opportunities that I think have just barely begun to be tapped.
I think what's crazy is, you guys have got a higher penetration in America. It's not massive. It was 21% or whatever, but ours is 14-15%. So it's even lower. And you sort of think, well, I think Sports England did a study, and it was about 50% of the adult population exercised in some form or another. So it was only 15% of members of gyms, but it was about 50% of the population that either played sport. You sort of skew those figures a little bit, because some will be members of gyms and play sport and do multiple. So I'm not entirely sure how accurate the data is, but it still goes with, there's still plenty of people out there that aren't exercising, aren't doing anything whatsoever, and so there is a huge market. Just before we finish, because I could speak to you for hours, and but obviously I've got to let you go at some point. But in terms of the sort of growth in the US, in where you're, because obviously you work with how many, 9,000, whatever it is. It's huge. Yeah, I probably won't let you know the figure.
A lot of studios, and we work 42 countries. The UK is our third biggest market we work in, so we've got.
It's crazy, isn't it? But
crazy.
Where are you seeing in terms of your growth, in terms of where the clients are coming from, to sort of go, help us grow even further? What's the sort of main areas that you guys are seeing?
So the first thing from a modality perspective, anything that is equipment based is driving forward. So reformer Pilates, heated yoga. I consider heat a piece of an equipment. We are going to see a case for continued HIIT programs like the Orange Theory Fitnesses of the world that are, combining multiple pieces of equipment into one workout. Additionally, we saw just such a massive rise in small group training and one-on-one training. For the last 18 or so years, there's been this huge shift to like group training. And it's interesting. I actually think it's swinging back. When I look at like where I'm putting my money, so literally like what am I investing in? Because I invest into a lot of different concepts. Where I'm putting a lot of my money right now happens to be in the small group training and one-on-one training space. Those people who are looking for that high touch have never gone away. So those are the modalities that I think, hey, where are we seeing just incredible growth and to be frank, not enough people going to them. I'm meaning that the individual studios are growing fast, not that we're necessarily seeing people driving into this. In terms of around the world, I think there's no doubt. I said this earlier. I think the UK is one of the best markets worldwide at this moment. I think that we're going to see continued explosive growth in Asia and the Middle East. I think that that's an area where we do an awful lot of work in both of those places, and we're seeing major things. And let me add that there is one area where I think we go through cycles, right? My mother is always like, hey, in the 1980s, the rise of like, the aerobics and all of those types of things. And then in the 90s, veering more towards strength. And we're back to a point where strength training is really, people are looking to it. They're excited by it. I love it. I lift weights. I do Pilates and I lift weights. That's my two primary things. Do I do other things? Absolutely. But those are like my absolute, they're on my calendar every week. And I think that any of the strength training based focuses, we work with an amazing group in London, Dabs Fitness. Cornelia and James are a great example of what a small studio can do with incredible strength and sport style conditioning on this one. So I think these are the areas of growth where we're just going to see some incredible things. So yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. And just quickly before you go, if you had to give an independent gym or a studio, a small studio, 2 or 3 tips that sort of go, okay, if you wanted to grow your business, these are the first things we do when we go in and have a look at a business.
So the very first thing is know your numbers. Numbers scare the shit out of people. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it other than that. But you've got to know your benchmarks on where this is. And it doesn't need to be a lot of numbers. You need to know your average client monthly value. You need to know the lifetime value of what a client is worth. You need to know your cost per acquisition. You need to have your basic retention or attrition, whatever way you want to go. It's two sides of the same coin rates. If you've got those numbers and you start with those as a benchmark and you start tracking those, that's the first thing. I mean, I promise you, you will start to say, how can I improve this? Or this worked or this didn't work. The second thing is that the UK is sitting, they're sitting in a luxurious place when it comes to meta advertising, in the sense that, I mean, it is still remarkably affordable.
Okay.
I would strongly advise you get very active on Facebook, Instagram, and potentially WhatsApp, depending on your community, for paid advertisements. This is something where I can't stress to you enough. We do this across the UK, and inevitably people are like, how is this so easy and so cheap? It takes testing. Testing should be a marketer's favorite word. I do want to say that. If it's not, you're going to have problems when it comes to marketing. You will be perpetually testing and saying, this worked, this didn't, I should tweak this, I should change that. That's the second thing. And I think the third thing is, don't ever discount the importance of your sales process. I know that that's something that both of us share a real passion on. That sales process is really, your client journey and sales process are one and the same. That is the one thing you should obsess over. and never stop. It can always get better. It can always improve. And I find that the places that are doing that consistently, they're never hitting plateaus. They're never hitting lulls. They're always the best in town. And I think that
Yeah.
that's a key place. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a really perfect place to finish. The one final question we ask everybody, Lisa, is what inspires you to do what you do? So a lot of there's so many different answers, and I love what comes in, from family to all sorts of stuff. But what inspires you to do the job that you do now?
Yeah. When I was a kid, I had an autoimmune disease. I have an autoimmune disease. And I was in and out of Children's Hospital when I was a kid for 2 years in New Orleans. And it was one of those things that I got to see 20-ish of us that were in a program with the same thing. I watched as many of them didn't make it at very young ages. And I watched some of them have different lifestyle choices. And the one thing that taught me more than anything is that the power of a good life, there's nothing greater than that.
Yeah.
Your health matters. And so, when I look at that and I say, like, what inspires and what drives, sometimes the darkest of days can be what drives us to the brightest of lights. And I think that for me, even though it was a dark season, I remain grateful for it every day of my life. I'm thankful I had the advocates of my precious mother and my grandparents and people who supported me through this and taught me what wellness could be. That has fueled so much of what I have done ever since, and why I'm still doing.
Well, there's no bigger reason than that, then, is there? So let's finish on that. Just to tell all the listeners, if you do want to reach out to Lisa, very prominent on LinkedIn. We'll put all the links and everything at the end of the podcast so people can reach out to you, Lisa. But I really appreciate your time today. And we will definitely get you back on. Obviously, when you're next back in the UK, give us a shout. We will pop and see you. And good luck with all these projects. It's great to see what you guys do over in the States. Obviously, we don't see so much of it in the UK, but I know that's coming. So we really look forward to that. And your fitness weeks, we've never heard of anything like that in terms of your restaurant weeks and so on. So we look forward to seeing that. That'll be a really interesting project, I think, to come. And a bit like when Black Friday arrived in the UK for the first time. Not that it's got anything to do with us, because we don't celebrate, obviously.
Totally.
Yeah, it is just nothing to do with us, but we still do Black Friday. So it'd be great to see a really positive thing come over from the States and us to take that on as well. So thank you very much for your time today, and we will catch you very soon.
Ryan, it was a joy. Y'all have a great one.